The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with the scent of stale coffee and the faint metallic tang of anxiety. Every eye in the briefing room was fixed on the map projected on the wall, a jagged, mountainous region that seemed almost too hostile to even contemplate. The shaded areas marked enemy patrols, hidden tunnels, and makeshift fortifications. The kind of intelligence that usually made seasoned soldiers shake their heads and mutter dark curses under their breath. Lieutenant Colonel Simmons, a man whose reputation for composure had earned him the nickname Stoneface, walked slowly to the front of the room. His boots echoed against the cold concrete floor, each step a drumbeat of impending doom. He stopped, tapped the map, and let out a low, deliberate sigh. "This is the situation," he began, voice calm but carrying the weight of inevitability. "We have a hostage situation deep inside a compound in the northern mountains. The compound is fortified, and intel confirms multiple layers of defense. The terrain is unstable, the weather unpredictable, and the enemy is experienced. Casualty estimates are high." A few hardened soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. They had been through countless missions, but this one made even them swallow hard. High altitude, cliffs, snow, and tunnels. Every element screamed danger. It wasn't just a mission, it was a gamble with death as the dealer. Simmons paused, letting the silence settle like a thick blanket. Then he unfolded a file and slapped it onto the table. Photographs of the compound, satellite images, and intercepted enemy communication spread across the surface. "The hostages have less than 48 hours, he continued. "If we fail, they don't survive." The veterans in the room were quiet. Some of them had been on impossible missions before, but even they understood the gravity here. Half of them had seen entire squads wiped out in places less dangerous than this. There were murmurs of disbelief. At the back of the room, Private Alina Ward sat straight-backed in her chair. She had been with the Army for just over 6 months, barely enough time for her boots to lose the shine from basic training. Small, composed, and painfully aware of her rookie status, she had been ignored by most of the veterans when she first joined the unit. She didn't mind. She knew how to observe. Alina's green eyes scanned the map intently, tracing the ridges and tunnels with a practiced gaze. She recognized patterns most of the others missed. Lines in the rock formations, snow drifts that indicated possible hidden paths, even subtle changes in vegetation that might hint at concealed entrances. It was like seeing a hidden picture in the chaos. The room erupted in soft murmurs as the captain spoke again. "This mission is voluntary. I want everyone to understand the risks. High risk, high probability of casualties. Anyone not willing to commit, step forward." Several soldiers hesitated, then shook their heads in silent refusal. Alina noticed the relief on a few faces, the dread etched into the older soldiers' eyes. It was the kind of situation that made even the most battle-hardened hesitate. Alina's pulse quickened, but not from fear. From the moment she saw the map, a strange certainty had settled in her chest. She saw what others didn't or refused to see. There was a way in, a hidden path that could make the mission possible, and if she didn't speak now, the unit would march straight into a death trap. She straightened, inhaled, and raised her hand. The room went still. All heads turned toward the rookie at the back. "Sir, I think we're looking at it wrong," she said, voice steady. The words were soft but carried weight, slicing through the room's tension like a knife. The captain's eyebrows lifted. "Go on, Private." His tone was neutral, but everyone in the room felt the unspoken skepticism radiating from him. Alina stepped forward, unfolding the map. "This ridge here," she said, pointing to a narrow line the intelligence team had marked as unstable and impassable. "It isn't as dangerous as it seems. The snowpack and rock formation create a natural cover, and if we approach from the northern face at dawn, we can avoid the main patrols. There's a shadow line that hides movement from the compound's towers." A veteran named Morales snorted from the front row. "You're kidding, right? Kid thinks she knows mountains better than recon drones and a dozen intel analysts." Alina ignored the remark. She continued, tracing the ridge with a gloved finger. I've studied patterns like this before: rock shifts, wind channels, sun angles. It's not perfect, but it's our only chance to get in undetected. The room went quiet, the veterans muttering under their breath. Some were clearly impressed, others were skeptical to the point of disbelief. The captain studied her, calculating, weighing experience against intuition. "This route," he said finally, his voice measured, "it's not on any of our plans. You're suggesting a path that's essentially invisible and untested." "Yes, sir," Alina replied, "but it's the only way we can reach the hostages alive." The captain leaned back, the chair creaking. He was silent for a moment, staring at the map, at the rookie who spoke with an authority she shouldn't yet possess. Finally, he said, "Private, if this fails, we could lose the entire squad. Do you understand?" Alina nodded, unwavering. "Yes, sir, I do, but if we don't try, the hostages die anyway." Morales shook his head, muttering, "She's insane," but the captain didn't argue. He closed the folder, looked around the room, and then said the words that made every head turn. "Rookie, you'll lead the approach." A stunned silence followed. The veterans' faces betrayed disbelief, some anger, some grudging respect. Alina felt the weight of responsibility crash down on her shoulders, yet she also felt the fire of determination ignite. The room seemed to shrink around her, every eye on her now. The gravity of the mission pressed in from all sides, the impossible odds, the lives at stake, the relentless mountain beyond the walls. She swallowed, forced her nerves into discipline, and straightened her back. She didn't have time to dwell on fear. Not now. Not when the lives of her team and the hostages rested on a path only she had dared to see. And as the room waited, the captain's voice cut through the thick silence. "We leave at 500, prep your gear. Recon is limited, but we move fast and we move smart. Private Ward, you will scout the ridge first. The unit follows your lead." Alina nodded. Her heart pounded, but a strange clarity settled over her. This was it. The moment that would define not just the mission, but her career, her courage, her very existence. As the soldiers filed out, murmuring among themselves, some skeptical, some quietly curious, Alina lingered a moment longer, eyes on the map. She traced the path again, memorizing every shadow, every contour. She knew the mountain wouldn't forgive mistakes, and neither would the enemy. Outside, the wind howled against the walls of the base, carrying the chill of snow yet to fall. Alina felt it on her face, a prelude to the storm ahead. She clenched her fists. The impossible mission wasn't just on the horizon. It was here, and somehow it was now hers. She stepped into the fading light, the mountain looming in the distance, and felt an electric mix of fear and exhilaration. Everything that came next would test her body, mind, and soul. And in that moment, as the last shadows of the briefing room faded, a single thought rang through her mind. If I fail, everyone dies. If I succeed, maybe, just maybe, we all live. The camera of fate was already rolling, and Private Alina Ward was about to walk straight into a storm the world said no one could survive. The mountain waited. And so did the impossible. The morning sun had barely begun to burn through the low-hanging clouds when Alina stood at the base of the ridge, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. She adjusted her pack, checking the weight of her gear, every strap and buckle secure. The soldiers around her were seasoned, experienced, and wary. They had volunteered for missions before, but none had been asked to follow the lead of a rookie, especially one barely out of training. Morales, the grizzled veteran with 100 scars etched across his body, gave her a long, assessing stare. "You sure about this, kid?" he asked, his voice low, carrying both skepticism and a begrudging curiosity. "I'm sure," Alina said, keeping her voice steady. She felt the weight of every life around her pressing on her shoulders. The ridge is unstable if approached the wrong way, but from here at dawn, the snow and shadows create a natural cover. It's the only route they wouldn't expect. A few other soldiers murmured among themselves, clearly struggling to accept that their fate rested in the hands of someone so new. But the captain, standing at the edge of the ridge with binoculars, nodded once. That was enough. They began the ascent. The climb was brutal, far steeper than the maps had suggested. Jagged rocks jutted from the mountainside, and loose snow slid beneath their boots, forcing them to dig in with axes and crampons. Wind gusts lashed at them, stealing their balance and battering their faces. It felt as if the mountain itself were testing them. Halfway up, disaster nearly struck. Morales, leading the group, misjudged a step and slid several feet down the icy slope. Alina reacted instantly, planting her axe in the ice and latching onto his arm with the other hand. She pulled him back to safety with every ounce of strength she had. "Thanks," Morales muttered, his usual bravado replaced with genuine respect, though his embarrassment made him mutter and unconvincing. "Don't make a habit of it, rookie." Alina didn't answer. There was no time for words. Every second was precious, every movement could mean life or death. As they pressed on, the ridge became narrower, forcing them to move in single file. The wind howled like a living entity, trying to push them off the edge. Alina's eyes never left the path ahead, memorizing every shadow, every loose rock. The ridge wasn't just a route, it was a delicate puzzle, and one wrong step would send them tumbling into the abyss. Hours passed. The team was exhausted, limbs burning, lungs aching from the thin air. And yet Alina's focus never wavered. She felt every contour of the mountain under her boots, every draft of wind, every subtle change in the snow's surface. Finally, they reached the crest of the ridge. Below them stretched the tunnel she had noticed in the briefing room, a narrow ice passage partially hidden by overhanging rocks and snow drifts. It looked impossible, almost unreal, like a secret the mountain had been keeping for centuries. "This is it," she said, pointing down. "The entrance is here. We can move through without being seen." Garcia, the unit's sniper, squinted through his scope. "Looks like a death trap to me." Alina shook her head. "No, the enemy didn't account for this. They think the ridge is impassable. That's why it's our way in." For a moment, silence settled over the group. Even the veterans had to admit, this route, as treacherous as it looked, might just give them the edge they needed. But then reality hit. Through the swirling snow, movement caught Morale's eye. A patrol was approaching the ridge from the opposite side. They were fast, disciplined, and would reach the top in minutes. The captain cursed under his breath. "They're too close. We need to move now." Alina's heart raced. She felt the icy grip of fear, not for herself but for the hostages, for her team. Every calculation she had made, every observation, depended on the timing being perfect. One misstep, and the mission would fail before it even began. She took a deep breath. "We split," she said, voice firm. "Morales and I create a diversion. The others move through the tunnel, keep low, move fast, stick to the shadows." The plan was dangerous, almost suicidal, but the team didn't question her. They trusted her instincts because there was no time to second guess. Alina and Morales positioned themselves along the ridge's edge. Using the natural curves of the rock and the cover of blowing snow, they prepared to draw the patrol's attention. Their breaths came in ragged clouds, hearts pounding in unison. A moment later, the patrol crested the ridge. The soldiers moved methodically, rifles ready, scanning the terrain with disciplined precision. Alina's pulse quickened as she calculated the timing. Every movement had to be synchronized. She signaled Morales. He nodded, and together they kicked loose small rocks and shouted a few well-placed commands. The patrol's attention snapped toward them, rifles raising. "Now," Alina hissed. The team in the tunnel sprang into action, slipping silently through the hidden passage while the patrol's focus remained on the diversion. Explosions of snow and shouted commands echoed across the ridge, but the team moved like shadows through the ice tunnel, guided by Alina's precise instructions and unwavering gaze. Inside the tunnel, the air was frigid, heavy with moisture and the scent of earth and ice. Elena led the group, counting every step, noting every sound. The walls were lined with jagged rocks, and every misstep could trigger a collapse, but she pressed on, undeterred. Then she noticed something. Marks along the walls, scratches, gouges, deliberate and patterned. They weren't from animals. Someone had been here before, leaving traces that suggested preparation, forethought, even danger. "Stop," Elena whispered, raising a gloved hand. The team froze mid-step. Her eyes scanned the walls. "They know about this tunnel." Morale's eyes widened. "You mean the enemy?" "Yes," Elena said, voice low but firm. "And it's not just a passage. It's a supply route, ammo, explosives, provisions, enough to equip an entire squad for months." The realization hit like a punch to the gut. This mission wasn't just dangerous, it was a death trap if they miscalculated. The stakes had just doubled, maybe tripled. Elena took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. Her training kicked in, the instincts she had honed in endless drills now guiding her every decision. She signaled the team forward, but cautiously. Every movement was deliberate, every footfall measured. And then a subtle sound, a metallic click under Morale's boot, echoed through the tunnel. The team froze, breaths held. Morales looked down, eyes wide. "I think I just set something off." Elena's stomach dropped. Tripwires, explosives. The enemy had anticipated their arrival. Time slowed. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity. The walls seemed to close in, and the cold air became suffocating. She felt the weight of responsibility crush her chest. One wrong move, one hesitation, and not just she, but her entire team and the hostages would pay the price. She squared her shoulders, voice calm but commanding. "Stay calm, move with me, follow exactly where I step. No sudden movements." The team nodded, trusting her entirely. Despite being the rookie, she had become the lifeline. And as they inched forward, the shadows of the tunnel hiding them from prying eyes, Elena couldn't shake the thought that had settled in her mind. They were walking into a trap, but if she played this right, they could survive. If she failed, they wouldn't. The tension was suffocating. The mountain, the tunnel, the enemy, all seemed poised to strike at any second. Yet Elena pressed on, each step a test of nerve, each breath a gamble. At the far end of the tunnel, a faint glimmer of light hinted at the outside world, a promise, or perhaps a final test. Elena's heart pounded. Every muscle screamed, every nerve fired. The impossible mission was underway. And the rookie had just begun to prove she might be the only thing standing between success and total disaster. The mountain loomed above, silent and relentless. And the enemy was watching. The icy tunnel swallowed their footsteps, muffling the sound of the soldiers' movements as though the mountain itself wanted to conceal their passage. Every breath hung in the air like a fragile wisp, every heartbeat echoing off the jagged walls. Elena led the way, her green eyes scanning each shadow, each groove in the rock, for signs of danger. She could feel the weight of responsibility in every step. One mistake now would ripple into catastrophe. Morales moved just behind her, eyes darting across the walls. "I've never seen markings like this," he muttered, his voice a low growl. "Not natural. Someone been here before, setting traps maybe." Elena nodded without looking back. "Exactly. Watch for wires, pressure plates, or anything out of place. Keep your eyes sharp, hands ready. One wrong step and we could trigger explosives that would collapse the tunnel. All of us gone." The team moved in tense silence, nerves stretched taut. Every creak of ice, every drip of water from the ceiling sounded like the footfalls of an unseen enemy. The tunnel twisted and turned in unnatural angles, like a labyrinth built to disorient intruders. Elena's knowledge of terrain, which she had pieced together from reconnaissance photos and satellite data, was their only guide. Garcia the sniper was next, rifle at the ready. He whispered, "Private, you're reading this like a book. How do you know it's safe?" Elena's jaw tightened. "It's not safe, nothing here is safe, but there's a rhythm to the traps. We can read it, move with it, survive. A faint glimmer caught her eye ahead, a thin metallic line stretching across the icy floor. She froze, instantly recognizing it as a tripwire. She motioned for the team to halt. Pressure triggered. One wrong step, her voice trailed off, leaving the unspoken consequence hanging in the frigid air. Morales crouched, scanning the wire with a flashlight. "Rookie, this is insane. If we trigger this, the whole tunnel could collapse." Alina traced the line with her gloved hand from a safe distance, noting how it connected to small metal devices embedded in the ice. "We can bypass it, but slowly. Everyone follow my steps exactly." They inched forward, one soldier at a time, moving like shadows on frozen stone. The tunnel seemed endless, a claustrophobic maze that tested both courage and patience. Every creak of metal, every subtle shift in the ice set their nerves on edge. Sweat mixed with the cold, stinging their faces, but they pressed on. Hours or maybe minutes, time seemed distorted past. Then, at a bend in the tunnel, Alina noticed something else. The walls were no longer bare. They were lined with crates stacked neatly against the ice. The labels were foreign, the symbols strange. She crouched down, examining them carefully. Morales leaned over her shoulder. "Rations, ammunition." "No explosives," Alina whispered. Her heart sank. "This tunnel isn't just a path, it's a supply route, enough to equip an entire platoon." Garcia's eyes widened as he read the markings. "We're walking into a trap big enough to bury us alive. And worse, the enemy knows we're coming." Alina's lips pressed into a thin line. She realized something vital. The mission had escalated. This wasn't just a hostage rescue anymore. It was a fight for survival in a tunnel rigged with death at every step. "Keep moving," she ordered, slowly, deliberately, "and whatever you do, don't touch anything unnecessary." Their progress was painstaking. Every crate, every shadow, every minor shift in the ice had to be accounted for. The tension was suffocating, the kind that left the muscles taut and the mind hyper-alert. They moved as one, following Alina's lead, a rope of human endurance navigating a frozen nightmare. Then came the click. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Alina's ears caught it immediately. Her stomach dropped. She spun around just in time to see Morales, boot brushing against a thin wire hidden beneath a layer of ice. "Step back," Alina shouted, lunging forward. She grabbed his arm, yanking him away just as a faint blue spark raced along the line. The tunnel shuddered, ice cracked, tiny rocks fell from the ceiling. The team froze, frozen in fear and adrenaline. Morales swallowed hard. "You're telling me we're alive because of you?" "Yes," she said tersely. "One wrong move and this entire tunnel goes up. That's why we move like ghosts, step for step, breath for breath." They continued, hearts hammering, muscles aching, every second a test of nerves. The path twisted, narrowing to less than a meter in some places, forcing them to squeeze single file. Alina led, always scanning, always calculating, every decision balancing risk with necessity. Then deeper inside the tunnel, something shifted. Shadows moved unnaturally along the walls as if the ice itself were alive. Alina froze, signaling the team. She raised a hand. Silence. A figure appeared ahead, emerging from the darkness. A lone insurgent scout, rifled backpack slung over his shoulder, eyes wide with surprise. Alina's mind raced. There wasn't time for hesitation. If he sounded an alarm, the mission and everyone in it would be over. She raised her hand in a silent gesture, and Morales, understanding instantly, drew his sidearm. The scout's eyes flicked between the soldiers, fear and confusion mixing in his gaze. He lunged for a radio too slow. Morales' shot rang out, muffled but precise, taking him down before he could alert anyone. Alina exhaled, her heart still racing. "Clear," she whispered. But the tension didn't ease. The scout had been just the tip of the iceberg. The tunnel was alive with hidden threats, every step a gamble. As they moved forward, Alina noticed a faint odor, something metallic, chemical. "Trip mines," she muttered. "They're in crates, scattered along the walls. If we touch them or shift them, the blast could collapse the ceiling." Garcia muttered, "Kid, you've basically turned into a human bomb disposal expert overnight." Alina didn't answer. Focused eyes, steady hands, and controlled breathing were all she could afford now. One miscalculation, one sudden movement, and they'd all be gone. Hours, or maybe it was minutes, later they reached a chamber deeper in the tunnel. The walls widened slightly and crates were stacked higher, forming a maze. But Alina noticed something unusual. Wires were more densely packed here, and some crates were missing. "They've been using this section recently," she whispered. "We're not the first intruders, and the enemy is expecting something." Morale's jaw tightened. "They're ready for us." "Yes," Alina said, swallowing hard. "But we have one advantage. They don't know we know the ridge, or how to use it. That gives us seconds, maybe a minute at most, to get through this safely." The soldiers nodded, muscles coiling, minds laser-focused. Each step was a negotiation with fate. Alina led them through the icy labyrinth, twisting and ducking, balancing on fragile surfaces, avoiding wires and crates rigged to explode. The air was thick, every breath a struggle, but they pressed on. And then, at a turn in the tunnel, Alina froze. Her heart lurched. She could hear faint voices ahead, muffled but unmistakable enemy soldiers, moving rapidly toward their position. "They're coming," she whispered, voice tense but calm. "We have seconds to decide, move faster or find cover and hope for the best." Morale's hand went to his rifle. Garcia adjusted his scope. The team's muscles coiled like spring-loaded traps. Alina's mind raced. Every calculation she had made, every observation from the briefing led to one choice: move. They slipped into shadows, pressed close to the icy walls, feet barely making noise. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. The voices grew louder. Footsteps echoed, boots crunching against frozen surfaces. Alina's pulse pounded in her ears. One mistake and the trap would snap. And then just ahead, a glimmer of light appeared, faint, flickering. It was the first sign of the tunnel opening, a possible exit, or another layer of the enemy's trap. Alina swallowed, gripping her rifle tightly. The impossible mission had become even more treacherous. And in that frozen, shadowed tunnel, she realized the truth. The mountain was alive with danger. The enemy was closer than they knew, and the fate of the unit rested on her next move. Every instinct screamed. One wrong step, and this mission, and everyone she cared about, would be lost forever. The faint glimmer of light grew brighter as Alina led her team through the narrow tunnel, each step deliberate, every breath calculated. The air was thick, damp, and bitterly cold, curling into their lungs with the sting of frostbite potential. Every soldier in the unit moved like a shadow, senses sharpened to the breaking point, muscles coiled for instant reaction. The distant murmur of the enemy's patrols echoed faintly, amplified by the tunnel's jagged walls, a constant reminder of how close danger truly was. Then Alina noticed it. The walls were no longer bare. They were lined with crates, not just a few, but stacks upon stacks, forming a corridor within the corridor. Each crate was meticulously labeled, with symbols unfamiliar to most of the team. Some bore markings that resembled explosive warnings, others seemed to contain supplies or munitions. She crouched and examined the crates carefully, eyes scanning for anything out of place. Morales leaned over her shoulder, voice low. "Rations, ammo." Alina shook her head. "No explosives. Trip mines, detonators, possibly even improvised charges. This isn't just a tunnel, it's a supply route, a hidden base. They've been using this corridor to store and move equipment under the mountain." Garcia's eyes widened. "So, we're walking into a trap that could blow us sky-high at any moment." "Yes," Alina said, voice tight but controlled. "One false move, one misstep, and the tunnel collapses. We're dealing with an enemy that planned for intrusion. They know the terrain better than we do down here." The weight of responsibility pressed on her chest like a physical force. She had led them into the tunnel, and now every second was a negotiation with death. Sweat ran down her temple despite the cold, and her gloved hands gripped her rifle tightly, knuckles white. They moved cautiously, the team following her step for step. Alina's mind raced, calculating every angle, every possible hazard. She scanned the walls, noting subtle differences in ice patterns and minor cracks that could indicate unstable structures. Small wires, almost invisible, ran along the crates and walls. She had seen enough in her training to know these were tripwires. One inadvertent nudge, one careless step, and they could trigger a chain reaction that would collapse the entire section. Hours, or was it minutes? Time had lost meaning, passed as they navigated the icy labyrinth. The tension was suffocating. Each soldier's breath was audible, echoing against the walls in an eerie chorus. Alina's eyes were constantly moving, catching every detail that others might miss, every subtle indication of danger. And then came the sound. A click, faint but unmistakable, almost drowned out by the wind that seeped into the tunnel from above. Alina froze instantly. Morales, just behind her, had brushed against a thin wire hidden beneath a layer of frost. She lunged forward, grabbing his arm and yanking him back, just as a faint spark arced along the metal line. The ice around it cracked, small shards falling to the floor. The team froze, every muscle tensed, every heartbeat synchronized with the cold, sharp rhythm of the tunnel. Morales whispered, barely audible, "You're telling me we're alive because of you." "Yes," Alina said tersely. "Stay close, watch every step, breathe slowly, move like we're part of the mountain itself." They pressed on inch by inch until they reached a wider chamber in the tunnel. The crates were stacked higher here, forming a maze within the icy walls. Alina noticed more wires, more potential triggers, and the unmistakable smell of chemicals in the air, explosives, probably recently handled. She crouched to inspect one crate, noting the intricate wiring connecting it to adjacent stacks. "This section is live," she murmured. "They're expecting us, or at least prepared for intruders. Every crate is a potential detonator. The path forward has to be exact. One wrong move." Morales swallowed hard, gripping his rifle tightly. "Kid, you're basically turning into a human bomb disposal expert. How are we even alive this far?" Alina didn't answer. Focus, calculation, and precision were her only tools now. The soldiers followed her lead, moving as one unit, shadows in the icy maze, silent and lethal. Then a faint sound reached Alina's ears, a low murmur, voices moving deeper in the chamber. She froze. The enemy patrols were closer than she thought, navigating the same tunnels, possibly aware of their presence. "Hold," she whispered, "everyone against the walls, low and silent." The team pressed against the icy walls, rifles raised. Alina's mind raced, analyzing the sounds. Footsteps, muffled but consistent. The enemy was moving fast, trained soldiers. One wrong move, one slip, and alarms would be raised. A shadow flickered across the far end of the chamber. Alina's pulse spiked. The figures emerged, two insurgents, rifles slung, unaware of the intruders behind them. They were searching, methodical, confident. Alina's heart pounded. One miscalculation and the tunnel would erupt in chaos. She signaled for the team to move silently to flanking positions, creating an improvised crossfire trap if necessary. The soldiers obeyed with military precision, silent shadows weaving through the icy corridors. The insurgents paused, examining the crates, moving deliberately. Alina realized that any sudden noise, footsteps, falling debris, even a whisper could alert them. Her hands were steady on her rifle, her mind a machine of focus. Then she noticed a small device on the floor, a pressure plate connected to a thin wire snaking along the wall. Another tripwire, another deadly test. She froze, gesturing to Morales to halt. Carefully, she traced the wire with her gloved hand, noting the weak point in the connection. Slowly, she nudged it aside, allowing them to pass safely. Minutes later, they reached a junction, a T-shaped intersection in the tunnel. Alina stopped, scanning both paths. One led deeper into darkness, the other had faint signs of human activity. Footprints in frost, crates slightly shifted. "They're expecting intruders," she whispered. "But the path on the right is more heavily guarded. We take the left, slower but safer, and use the right as a diversion if necessary." The team followed, each soldier moving with precise care. Every step, every breath, every microsecond mattered. The tunnel seemed to close around them, icy walls like the jaws of a trap. The slightest sound could trigger disaster. And then the faintest click, the metal scraping against stone. Alina froze, instantly aware of the danger. A small crate had shifted beneath Morale's boot. Sparks flew along the wire. She grabbed his arm and yanked him back, her voice low and urgent. "Hold still. Don't move." The crate trembled but did not explode. Alina exhaled slowly, relief mingling with adrenaline. The team pressed on, silently grateful for her precision. But even as they advanced, Alina knew the worst was yet to come. The tunnel's final chamber loomed ahead, larger, wider, and likely filled with the enemy's most dangerous defenses. The crates, the tripwires, the narrow passages, this was only the prelude. Her heart pounded. The mission was no longer a simple rescue. It was survival, every second, every step, every decision a knife-edge balance between life and death. And as the tunnel stretched before them, dark and foreboding, Alina realized the truth. The enemy knew about this route, knew how to use it, and had prepared every trap with lethal precision. Yet she also realized something else. They didn't know her. They didn't know that a rookie, overlooked and underestimated, could read the mountain, the ice, and the enemy's traps like a living map. The team pressed forward, shadows among shadows, every step a heartbeat closer to discovery or disaster. And in that frozen, echoing tunnel, Alina's mind sharpened to a singular focus: survive, lead, and protect the unit. Because the moment they exited this icy labyrinth, the real mission would begin. And there was no turning back. The tunnel trembled beneath their boots, faint vibrations that grew into low, rumbling groans echoing off jagged walls. Alina's pulse spiked. The click of tripwires and the faint hum of unseen explosives had been a warning. Now, the mountain itself seemed to react as if it knew they were trespassing. Dust and tiny shards of ice drifted down from the ceiling like snow from a shaking tree. Each breath was a cloud of frost, each step a gamble. "Move faster," Alina hissed, voice sharp and urgent. "We don't have time to dawdle." Morales, following closely, gritted his teeth. "Faster! The ceiling, about to collapse on us, and you want us to go faster." "Exactly," she snapped, eyes scanning the walls. "Every second we hesitate, more explosives could trigger. We need to get through now." The team obeyed, stepping carefully, yet faster than before. The ice under their feet groaned and cracked. Every movement, every misstep could spark a chain reaction that would bury them alive. The dim light ahead of them flickered, shadows dancing like phantoms in the icy corridors. Then came the first explosion. A deafening blast ripped through the tunnel ahead, throwing shards of ice and rock into the air. The floor trembled violently, knocking Garcia off his feet. Alina dove forward, grabbing him, pulling him up just as a chunk of rock slammed where he had stood moments before. "Keep moving," she shouted over the roar. "Don't stop, one step at a time." They pressed forward, hearts hammering, lungs burning. The tunnel seemed to narrow, forcing them into single file again. Debris fell from the ceiling, carving paths of danger behind them. Each explosion shook the icy walls, sending clouds of frost and dust into the air, stinging eyes and lungs. Morales stumbled on uneven ice. Alina didn't hesitate. She lunged, grasped his arm, and yanked him upright. "No stopping, no falling," she barked, the authority in her voice cutting through the chaos. A sudden rumble sounded from above. A larger section of the ceiling gave way. Chunks of ice and stone crashed down a few feet away, sending a shudder through the floor. The team flinched, hearts racing. The tunnel was alive with destruction, a labyrinth of death threatening to collapse around them. Almost there, Elena muttered to herself, though it felt like a prayer. Almost through. Garcia pointed ahead, voice tense. The exit, I see light. But the relief was short-lived. From deeper in the tunnel, the faint sound of boots, enemy boots, echoed through the icy corridors. They weren't just trapped by collapsing walls, the enemy was closing in. They know we're here, Morales muttered, his usual bravado gone. And they're not giving up. Elena's mind raced. There was no time to strategize. Every second mattered. Every step was a calculation. One misstep and the tunnel would explode completely, killing them all. She signaled the team forward, guiding them toward the light. The exit was visible now, faint but promising. Then came another click. Elena froze. She spun toward the source. A thin metal wire stretched across the floor, a hidden tripwire likely connected to more explosives. The realization hit. The enemy had rigged multiple sections of the tunnel. One false move, one misstep, and it wouldn't just collapse the tunnel. It could set off a chain reaction, burying them in ice and stone. Step back, she shouted. Carefully, she traced the wire, noting the weak point in the connection. Everyone follow my lead exactly. One by one, don't rush. They moved in a tense, meticulous line, every footfall deliberate. The tunnel's walls seemed to close in, shadows dancing as explosions continued to rock the ice. The air was thick with dust and smoke from minor detonations, stinging their eyes, making every breath a struggle. Halfway through this section, a larger explosion erupted behind them. The sound was deafening. Ice and rock fell in showers, striking the walls and floor with terrifying force. Elena was momentarily thrown to her knees but recovered instantly, grabbing Morales and pulling him along. Don't look back, she shouted. Keep moving. The team pressed forward, every muscle straining, every nerve screaming. The tunnel shook violently, and Elena knew that this was no longer about stealth or strategy. It was survival. The mountain itself seemed to conspire against them. Through the haze of dust and falling debris, Elena noticed something alarming. One of the crates along the wall had shifted during the tremors, exposing a network of wires, more explosives. They've rigged the entire tunnel, she realized, voice low but steady. Every section is a trap. We can't stop, can't hesitate, can't make mistakes. Morales' eyes were wide with fear, but he nodded. Lead the way, rookie. We're with you. Elena led them forward, guiding them through the most dangerous sections. Each step was measured, every motion precise. The tunnel seemed endless, a frozen corridor of death that tested their endurance, courage, and instinct. Then came a section where the ice floor cracked beneath their feet, a thin sheet spanning a small crevasse. Elena assessed it instantly. One wrong weight could plunge someone into the darkness below. She stepped carefully, testing the ice with the tip of her boot, then extended her hand to guide Morales across. Behind them, the rumble of explosions continued, closer and closer. Dust and shards of ice pelted them, but Elena refused to let fear dictate her actions. Step by step, inch by inch, she led the team across the deadly section. Finally, a faint glow illuminated the tunnel ahead, the exit. Light and the promise of air, open sky, freedom. But it wasn't over yet. A section of the ceiling groaned ominously above, jagged ice beginning to loosen. Another massive explosion could bury them just yards from salvation. Elena made a split-second decision. She gestured for the team to sprint the final distance, every muscle in her body coiled for explosive movement. They moved as one, boots pounding against ice, breaths ragged and shallow, hearts hammering in unison. Just as they reached the edge of the tunnel, a massive section of ceiling collapsed behind them, sending a wall of ice and rock crashing down, sealing the tunnel in a thunderous roar. The team gasped, shaken but alive. They stumbled out onto the ridge, snow whipping across their faces, lungs burning from cold and adrenaline. The mountain loomed above them, silent now, but every nerve screamed that it was still alive, still dangerous. The captain's voice crackled over the radio. Status. Elena, catching her breath, responded, "We made it. Tunnel is gone behind us. Moving toward objective." Morales patted her shoulder, a mixture of relief and awe in his eyes. "You did it, rookie. You got us through." Elena allowed herself a brief nod, but she didn't celebrate. The mission wasn't over. The hostages were still in danger, the enemy still alive, and the ridge ahead was treacherous. And as they moved toward the compound, Elena's mind raced, calculating the next steps, knowing that the impossible mission was still very much alive, and that the real test was about to begin. Every soldier behind her knew it too. They had survived the tunnel, but survival was only the first battle. The mountain, the enemy, and fate itself were far from finished. And in that moment, Elena realized the full weight of what lay ahead. The impossible wasn't behind them. It was just beginning. The icy wind whipped across the ridge as Elena led her team forward, each step a battle against the biting cold and treacherous terrain. The snow crunched beneath their boots, masking the sound of their approach, but the jagged cliffs and sheer drops made every movement a gamble. The tunnel behind them had been just the first gauntlet, a trial that had tested nerves and precision. Ahead lay the heart of the mission, the compound where the hostages were held, guarded by trained, ruthless soldiers who would stop at nothing to keep them contained. The team spread out, maintaining tactical formation. Morales and Garcia flanked her, rifles at the ready, eyes scanning every shadow for movement. Behind them, the rest of the unit moved silently, each soldier understanding that their survival depended entirely on Elena's decisions. Despite being a rookie, she carried herself with the authority and calm of a veteran, her green eyes scanning every ridge, every outcropping, every glimmer of potential danger. "Private Ward," the captain's voice crackled over the comms, low but firm. "Report status." "We're on the ridge, moving toward the eastern perimeter," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Tunnel is sealed behind us. We've lost no one, but the enemy may be aware of movement, advancing cautiously." "Copy that. Objective is critical. You know the plan. Maintain stealth until we're in striking distance," the captain instructed before the line went silent again. Elena nodded to herself. Stealth was no longer an option, it was a necessity. One false step, one poorly timed move, and the entire unit could be exposed. And yet she also knew that time was slipping away. The hostages had less than 24 hours to survive, and every moment counted. She crouched behind a snowdrift, peering down at the compound below. It was massive, sprawling across the rocky plateau, surrounded by guard towers and razor wire. Movement within the walls suggested soldiers patrolling in shifts, rifles scanning the perimeter, the kind of disciplined vigilance that only seasoned combatants possessed. "This isn't going to be easy," Morales muttered, voice tense. "Even for you, rookie, the compound is airtight." Elena's jaw tightened. "We don't have a choice. Either we get in or the hostages die." She traced a path with her gloved finger, marking patrol patterns she had memorized from the briefings and recon. There was a blind spot along the eastern wall, where shadows from jagged rocks obscured line of sight. It wasn't perfect, but it was their only chance to approach undetected. The team moved as one, shadows among shadows, slipping across snow and rock with careful precision. Elena's heart pounded, but her mind was razor-sharp, calculating every possible hazard, every possible reaction from the enemy. One misstep, one snap of a branch, could send alarm bells ringing and doom the mission. Halfway across the ridge, Elena froze, sensing movement in the corner of her vision. A lone sentry, far from the main patrol, was rounding a corner near the compound's perimeter. She pressed a gloved finger to her lips, signaling the team to stop. The soldier's gaze swept across the ridge, coming dangerously close to their position. Morales held his breath, muscles taut. Garcia adjusted his scope, finger hovering over the trigger. The soldier paused, looked in their direction, then shrugged and moved on, oblivious to their presence. Elena exhaled slowly, a small victory, but the tension in her chest remained tight. "Keep moving," she whispered. "We're almost to the blind spot. One more stretch and we'll be in range." The team followed her lead, moving with careful urgency. The snow was deeper here, each step a struggle, but Elena's instructions were precise. She knew exactly where to place every foot, how to distribute weight, how to stay in the shadows. Her knowledge of terrain and instinctive sense of timing kept them alive. Then a sudden noise, metal scraping against stone, echoed from the ridge behind them. Elena spun, heart hammering, and saw a figure emerging from the shadows, an enemy scout, likely alerted by the previous tunnel collapse. The scout froze, spotting them immediately. "Move," Elena shouted, diving behind a rock with Morales and Garcia. The scout raised his rifle, but before he could fire, Elena acted. Using the training she had absorbed in countless drills, she rolled to the side, grabbing a small rock and hurling it past the enemy, drawing his attention. The scout reacted instinctively, turning toward the sound, but not quickly enough. Morales fired a single, precise shot, taking the scout down silently. Elena exhaled, adrenaline surging. One mistake could have blown their cover. "Check the perimeter," she whispered, scanning every angle. "We move now while the patrols are unaware." The team resumed their approach, the blind spot in sight. They crept along the shadowed wall, hearts pounding, breaths shallow, muscles coiled for instant reaction. The compound loomed closer, the tension almost unbearable. Every movement had consequences, every misstep could be fatal. Finally, they reached the edge of the blind spot. Elena crouched, peering around the rock to observe the compound's eastern gate. There 2 guards were stationed, rifles at the ready. Patrols moved intermittently, and the narrow opening in their coverage presented the perfect, albeit risky, opportunity. "We go in 2 at a time," Elena whispered, outlining the plan. "Silence is key. Garcia covers the overwatch from the ridge above. Morales and I will neutralize the guards quietly. Then we move the rest in, fast and silent." Morales nodded, trusting her without question. The team was small but disciplined, every soldier ready to act on instinct and Elena's commands. The first pair moved forward, crouching low, shadows blending with the rocks. Elena counted slowly, heart racing, each second stretching into an eternity. The guards were just meters away, unaware of the danger closing in. With a nod, Elena and Morales moved. They struck with precision, knocking the guards unconscious before they could raise an alarm. Every muscle tensed, every nerve firing as they secured the gate. The team slipped through silently, one by one, entering the compound under the cover of shadow and snow. The sprawling complex stretched before them, a maze of buildings and corridors, each potentially harboring hostiles or traps. Elena's mind raced, calculating the fastest route to the hostages. Intelligence suggested they were held in a central building, guarded by at least a dozen heavily armed soldiers. The odds were overwhelming, but hesitation wasn't an option. She signaled the team forward, moving through the compound with surgical precision. Shadows shifted, doors creaked slightly, and every step heightened the tension. Every heartbeat, every breath was a reminder that discovery could happen at any second. And then Elena froze. Ahead, a guard patrol was rounding the corner. They hadn't been aware of this route. She pressed her hand to Morales, signaling him to halt. The team pressed against walls, silent and unseen. The patrol passed, oblivious to their presence, and Elena exhaled slowly, relief mixing with adrenaline. They were close, but the real danger, the hostage building, was just ahead. She motioned for the team to move forward, carefully navigating corridors and avoiding patrols. The hostages were within reach, but every step brought the threat of detection closer. The stakes had never been higher, and the tension in the compound was suffocating. Elena's mind focused on one singular goal: reach the hostages, neutralize the guards, and extract them safely. Every decision from here on out could mean life or death, not just for her team, but for those they had come to save. And as the shadows of the compound stretched before them, Alina realized the mission wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about courage, timing, and trust. One misstep, one hesitation, and the impossible would claim them all. The clock was ticking. The hostages' lives hung by a thread, and the rookie soldier who had guided her team through impossible odds was about to confront the enemy head-on. The impossible mission was now at its climax. And Alina knew the real test of courage was about to begin. The central building loomed ahead, dark and imposing, a fortress of stone and steel that had held the hostages for hours, perhaps even days. Alina crouched behind a low wall, eyes scanning the perimeter. Shadows shifted under the dim moonlight, each movement carrying the weight of danger. Every patrol, every guard, every flicker of motion was a potential threat. "Listen up," Alina whispered, voice low but firm. "We move in two teams. Morales and I breach from the east entrance. The rest flank around and secure the windows. Silent first, then we neutralize the guards. Understood?" The team nodded, tension coiling in their shoulders. Every soldier knew that stealth was a fragile illusion here. One mistake and the alarms would sound, turning a careful operation into a desperate fight for survival. They approached the east entrance, the snow crunching softly under their boots, each step a calculated risk. Alina's pulse raced, but her hands were steady on her rifle. Every nerve was alert, every sense tuned to danger. Morales glanced at her. "You sure about this, rookie?" "I have to be," she replied, eyes narrowing. "One wrong move, we lose the element of surprise, and if we do, the hostages—" She didn't finish the sentence. They both understood. With a deep breath, Alina kicked the door open, moving inside like a shadow. Morales followed immediately. The interior was dark, cold, and silent, broken only by the muffled shuffle of guards inside. The scent of oil and smoke hung in the air, a fortress alive with tension. Alina signaled for the team to split, each member taking positions near doorways, windows, and corners. They moved with rehearsed precision, weapons raised but fingers off the triggers, every motion deliberate. The first guard appeared, rounding a corner with his rifle raised. Alina lunged forward, a swift kick to the chest sending him sprawling silently into the shadows. Morales followed, knocking another guard unconscious before he could react. The team moved through the building like a well-oiled machine, shadows among shadows, silent predators navigating a maze of danger. But even as they advanced, the tension grew. Every creak of floorboards, every faint rustle of clothing, every whisper of breath seemed magnified, threatening to expose them. Suddenly, a shout echoed from the second floor. One of the patrols had discovered movement. Alina's heart leapt, adrenaline surging. "Engage!" she shouted, breaking the calm with authority. Chaos erupted instantly. Shots rang out, echoing through the hallways. The team responded with precision, returning fire and neutralizing threats as they advanced. Dust and smoke filled the air, mixing with the scent of fear and gunpowder. Alina ducked behind a pillar, scanning the room. A guard aimed at her, but she rolled forward, firing in quick succession. The guard went down and she pressed onward, each step measured despite the chaos surrounding her. Through the gunfire, she caught sight of the hostages, huddled in a corner, terrified but unharmed so far. Her chest tightened with urgency and resolve. Every second counted. "Move them," she shouted, signaling Morales and the rest of the team to secure the hostages. Morales ushered the hostages toward a safe corner while Alina covered them, firing precise shots to keep enemy soldiers at bay. The building shook under the impact of gunfire and minor explosions, but the team pressed forward, each soldier aware of the fragile line between success and disaster. One guard lunged from a doorway, rifle swinging. Alina reacted instinctively, knocking the weapon aside and sending him crashing into a wall. Blood ran down his temple, but Elena had no time to pause. The hostages were counting on them. The team moved like shadows through the building, neutralizing threats, clearing rooms, and securing exits. Dust, debris, and the roar of gunfire created a haze that disoriented the enemy, but Elena's mind remained razor-sharp, calculating every move, every path, every risk. Then came the explosion, a secondary charge set in a hallway behind them. The blast shook the building violently, sending shards of wood and metal flying. Elena dove, rolling to the side, narrowly avoiding debris that would have crushed her. Morales and the team scrambled, returning fire at guards who had survived the shockwave. Elena's heart pounded. The building itself seemed to fight against them, the enemy's traps turning the fortress into a death trap. But she pressed on, guiding the hostages toward the eastern exit they had scouted. Garcia took overwatch from a stairwell, picking off guards who threatened their path. The others moved the hostages swiftly, keeping low and fast. Adrenaline and fear fused into a singular focus. Elena reached the doorway and paused, scanning the perimeter. 2 guards stood between them and the exit, rifles raised, unaware of the precision approaching from shadows. She signaled Morales. "On 3, she whispered. 1, 2, 3. They burst from the shadows simultaneously, striking with coordinated speed. One guard went down to a swift kick. The other was neutralized with a precise shot from Morales. The path was clear. The hostages stumbled forward, guided by Elena and the team, adrenaline surging as they moved toward freedom. Every step was tense, every shadow a potential threat. But hope surged. After hours of terror and near death, the end was in sight. And then a voice rang out from the far corridor, a commanding shout unmistakable: "Reinforcements." Elena's pulse spiked. They weren't done yet. The enemy had regrouped faster than anyone anticipated, and the building, already unstable, now became a deadly maze of fire, debris, and human predators. "Move faster," Elena barked, urgency cutting through the chaos. "We're not safe until we're out." The team pressed forward, hostages in tow, navigating falling debris and sporadic gunfire. The walls groaned, the floors trembled, and the air thickened with smoke and fear. Every second was a battle, every heartbeat a race against fate. Suddenly, the floor beneath one of the hostages cracked, a hidden trap triggered by the earlier explosions. Elena lunged, catching the young man before he fell, dragging him to safety with adrenaline and raw strength. "Go, go," she shouted, guiding the remaining hostages toward the exit. Finally, the eastern doors came into view, a faint glimmer of moonlight signaling freedom. The team surged forward, bullets whizzing past, the building groaning in protest as minor explosions continued to rock the interior. They burst into the open air, snow crunching beneath boots, cold wind stinging their faces, hearts racing. The hostages stumbled, disoriented but alive, guided by Elena and Morales to cover behind rocks along the ridge. Behind them, the building shuddered violently, a series of explosions collapsing the structure in a deafening roar. Dust, snow, and debris shot into the air, obscuring the view. But Elena's eyes were fixed on her team and the hostages, all accounted for. She allowed herself a brief breath, chest heaving, heart pounding like a drum. They had survived the impossible. Against odds that should have killed them, they had prevailed. But Elena knew better. The mission wasn't over. The enemy might regroup, reinforcements could be on the move, and the hostages were still vulnerable in the cold expanse of the ridge. The wind howled across the plateau, carrying the echoes of the fallen building and the distant sounds of pursuit. Elena scanned the horizon, green eyes sharp and determined. Every nerve screamed that danger was still near, and every instinct warned that this victory, though hard one, was only temporary. And in that moment, Elena realized the truth. They had survived the impossible, yes, but survival alone would not ensure victory. The final challenge, the true test of courage and leadership, was still ahead. and she, the rookie soldier who had changed the fate of the unit, would face it head-on. The wind tore across the ridge, whipping snow into blinding sheets as Alina led the hostages and her team toward the extraction point. Every footfall was an exercise in caution. The plateau was exposed. The enemy could appear from any direction, and time was slipping away. Behind them, the ruined compound smoldered, the echoes of explosions fatting into the night. Ahead, a hovering Black Hawk helicopter, partially obscured by snow and darkness, signaled the possibility of escape, but the path to it was treacherous. Alina kept her rifle raised, eyes scanning the shadows. Morales flanked her, while Garcia covered the rear, sniper scope trained on potential threats. The hostages, terrified and shivering, clung to their rescuers, eyes wide, not fully comprehending the danger that still lingered. "Stay close," Alina shouted over the howling wind. "Move in pairs, keep low." Every step forward was a gamble. The enemy was regrouping, likely anticipating the extraction, and their perimeter was still dangerous. Alina had calculated multiple routes to the helicopter, each fraught with risk, each requiring split-second timing. Any deviation could cost lives. Suddenly, a flash of movement appeared along the ridge, enemy reinforcements, armed and moving fast, cutting off the most direct path to the extraction zone. Alina froze for a split second, then lunged forward, pulling Morales and two hostages behind a snowdrift. "They're trying to trap us," Morales shouted, firing a burst toward the advancing soldiers. Alina's mind raced. The ridge was exposed, the wind whipping snow into visibility of barely a few feet. Every second counted. She scanned the terrain and spotted a narrow gully leading down the slope, partially hidden by snow and rock. It was risky, steep, treacherous, but it offered cover and a flanking approach to the helicopter. "Gully," she shouted, signaling the team. "Move now." The unit surged forward, guiding the hostages down the slope with careful precision. Alina led the way, hands gripping rifles, eyes sharp for any sign of danger. Snow and ice threatened to betray every step, but they moved as one, synchronized, calculated, relentless. From above, enemy fire rang out, bullets whizzing past, kicking up snow and ice around them. Alina returned fire, each shot deliberate, each motion calculated to protect the hostages. The wind screamed in their ears, but she blocked it out, focusing on one truth. Survival depended on speed, stealth, and absolute trust in each other. Halfway down the gully, Morales slipped on ice. Alina reacted instantly, grabbing his arm and pulling him back onto solid footing. "No falling, keep moving." The hostages stumbled but were guided forward, adrenaline and fear fusing into courage as they followed Alina's lead. The gully narrowed, forcing them to move single file. Every second was a negotiation with gravity, snow, and enemy fire. Garcia covered them from above, picking off enemy soldiers with precise, calculated shots. Each bullet cleared a path, but the risk was constant. One miscalculation, one stray round, and the ridge could erupt into chaos. As they neared the helicopter's landing zone, the wind intensified, nearly knocking them off balance. The rotors sliced through the snow, visibility dropping to mere feet. Alina's heart pounded. They were so close, freedom within reach, but the enemy wasn't done yet. Suddenly, a grenade landed near one of the hostages. Alina reacted instantly, throwing herself over the young man just as the device exploded, sending snow and rock flying. The concussion threw her forward, chest hitting the ground hard, but she rolled up immediately, teeth gritted, eyes blazing with determination. "Go move," she shouted, signaling the remaining hostages. Morales grabbed the last two hostages, dragging them toward the helicopter. Alina covered them, picking off two more soldiers who attempted to intercept. The enemy had underestimated her, underestimated the rookie who had defied every expectation. Finally, the unit reached the helicopter, the ramp lowered, engines roaring against the storm. The hostages were ushered inside first, guided by Alina and Morales. Garcia jumped in last, ensuring the rear was clear. Alina climbed aboard, heart hammering, breath ragged. She took a quick glance out the open side, spotting the last enemy soldier advancing toward the ridge. With steady hands, she aimed and fired, a single shot precise, ending the threat. The helicopter lifted off, slicing through the storm, climbing over the plateau. Below, the ridge receded, the smoldering ruins of the compound growing smaller. Elena's chest heaved, adrenaline still surging, but a deep sense of accomplishment washed over her. They had survived the impossible. Inside the helicopter, the hostages whispered thanks, their faces etched with relief and disbelief. Morales clapped Alina on the shoulder, a mixture of pride and awe in his eyes. "I still can't believe it. You got us through all of that." Alina allowed herself a small smile, though her mind remained alert. "It's not over until we're back at base," she said, voice steady despite exhaustion. "We're not safe until everyone is accounted for." The helicopter flew through the storm, every bump and gust of wind a reminder of the risks they had faced. But for the first time in hours, Alina allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the weight of survival and success. The captain's voice crackled over the radio. "Status." "All personnel secure," Alina replied, voice calm but firm. "Hostages are safe. Mission complete." "Outstanding work, Private Ward," the captain responded. "You've done more than anyone expected. Prepare for debrief." Alina exhaled slowly, letting the tension ebb slightly. Her team gathered around, weary but alive, the bond forged through fire and ice stronger than ever. They had faced death, overcome impossible odds, and survived. And in doing so, a rookie soldier had changed the fate of the unit forever. As the helicopter cut through the storm toward base, Alina allowed herself a glance at the snow-covered ridge below. The mountain had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and demanded everything they had to give. And yet, against every expectation, they had prevailed. Her thoughts drifted to the hostages, safe for now, their lives forever changed by a single courageous act. She thought of her team, each soldier relying on trust, skill, and instinct, proving that even in the most impossible missions, unity and determination could triumph. Morales leaned against the wall, looking at her with respect. "You really are something else, rookie. Never doubted you for a second." Alina shook her head, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "We did it together. This wasn't just me, it was all of us." Outside, the storm raged, a reminder of the dangers still lurking in the world. But inside, the helicopter hummed steadily, carrying them away from the mountain, away from death, toward safety, toward home. And as the base lights appeared in the distance, shimmering through the snow, Alina felt a profound sense of resolve. The impossible mission had been accomplished, but the lessons, the scars, and the bonds forged would remain forever. The rookie soldier who had once been underestimated had led her team through peril, changed the fate of the mission, and emerged not just alive, but victorious. And in that moment, as the helicopter touched down and the storm began to fade, Alina realized something powerful. Courage wasn't about rank or experience. It was about heart, instinct, and the refusal to accept defeat. The mission was over. The impossible had been conquered, and the unit, forever changed, would carry that story forward, a story of fear, resilience, and triumph that no one would ever forget.